Bo Nix had a strong rookie year for the Denver Broncos in 2024, but he has a lot of things he needs to clean up heading into 2025. We'll talk about this and more on today's episode of the Scouting Room NFL Podcast.
Welcome to the Scouting Room Podcast with Dame and Dan. If you love NFL football, college football, and the NFL Draft, this podcast is for you.
Touchdown!
Dame and Dan will provide real analysis featuring analytics and film to back up their takes. Please sit down, grab your drink, and let's scout.
Welcome into the Scouting Room NFL Podcast with Dame and Dan. I'm Dame, and that's Dan. And guys, we thank you so much for tapping in with us, joining us here. And we're getting into three going to be second-year players from the 2024 NFL Draft class. We could talk about Bo Nix. Can he replicate the success he had in 2024 as a rookie? Brian Thomas Jr., will he remain wide receiver one for the Jacksonville Jaguars? We're going to talk about his pros and cons. And then Jared Verse, the speed, the power demon for those Los Angeles Rams. And let's get into Bo Nix's game, Dan. And this is a guy that, from the tape, he had some good moments last year, and he did some good things on the season. A guy that averaged, I think, 222 passing yards per game last year. He protected the ball fairly well for the most part. He did have some games where it kind of with Bo Nix is like when it goes bad, when it rains, it poured. So like he had multiple games where he had two plus interceptions, on the season and everything. But he got better. The start of the season was a little rough, but he got better as the year went on. And on the season, he completed pretty much about 66% of his passes, 29 passing touchdowns, 12 interceptions, 3,775 passing yards. And he was behind, arguably, Danny, you tell me if you agree, arguably the best pass blocking offensive line in the NFL last year. Like, they really protected him very well. And when you look at, for me, when I watched this game and I watched the tape of him, he gets the ball, especially to the first read, very well. He could be very decisive there. The quick game he's very good at. And he was good at that in Oregon, too, in terms of what he was able to do. Dan, the quick game, showcasing his ability to get the ball out in a timely fashion. But not only just that, like when you look at the type of concepts he really ran well for Denver, the stick concepts and the multiple variations of stick and spot concepts that they ran, where it was just sticks, stick outs, different things of that nature. And he knew how to read it quickly, read it well, and get the ball out to his receivers. He lives in that short to intermediate part of the field. And of course, he has a good arm. Like he can fit the ball in some tight windows. I can't remember which game I was watching, but he drilled. I think it might have been the Brian Thomas, across the middle between multiple zone defenders and just roped it in there. And of course, he has the mobility that you want to see from a quarterback in today's NFL to say, hey, can you get me out of trouble? Do you have a get out of trouble free card? Bo Nix has that, Dan.
Yeah, I think what we saw from Bo was a combination of Sean Payton doing a lot of what he wants to do, run the football, but also what he's comfortable doing. And that's when you see those stick concepts, those intermediate concepts over the middle of the field. And you talk about his offensive line. Last year, he faced pressure under 2.5 seconds at the second lowest rate in the NFL. This is, again, via NFL Pro. Please, you guys, utilize the stats. These advanced stats are fantastic from NFL Pro. And that was the second lowest rate in the NFL. Like, again, harping on that fact. We want to put young quarterbacks in environments where they're going to succeed. And I think you were talking about Cortland Sutton, not Brian Thomas, that pass you were talking about. And that was really the get-out-of-jail-free card. The get-out-of-jail-free card for Bo Nix was, if I'm under pressure, if there's something going on that I don't necessarily see behind the defense in terms of switching, or you see one-on-one coverage and I got pressure in my face, I'm throwing it to Cortland Sutton, which is not a bad thing to do. He had a real big resurgence last year because of that connection. They developed that very, very quickly. But when we look at what Bo Nix did, I think he did better in Denver than he ever did at Oregon to an extent, was throwing the football outside the pocket. He, I believe, was one of the best quarterbacks in throwing the football on the run. And let me find this right here. He threw for a league high 904 yards with 8 touchdowns on passes while he was on the run. at 8 or more miles per hour this past season, which was 4th most by any quarterback in a season since 2016. And that's behind Patrick Mahomes in his 2018 year. So we saw not just him getting out of the pocket, making things happen when things broke down, but Sean Payton putting him on bootlegs, getting him naturally outside the pocket, rolling the pocket out to his right. Again, taking that field. We know he can read some full field concepts, but when you give Bo Nix or some of these young quarterbacks half field reads, it makes it so much easier for them. And he's comfortable throwing the football on the move. He's athletic, and he made some throws that I didn't anticipate coming out of Oregon. So you see some of the obvious tools that Sean Payton has at his disposal, but you also have to remember that when you're pressured at under 2.5 seconds in one of the lowest rates in the NFL, you're naturally going to become more confident when the run game is effective to an extent, like they were. They still ran the football at a very high level. They were able to put him in situations where he was comfortable, and he didn't have to throw the ball a ton. So times where he did, you saw some of those mistakes come into play. And then when you talked about it, when pressure gets in his face quickly, that's the big thing right now is young quarterbacks getting comfortable with that. Some come in and they're just easy and it's no big deal. Jaden Daniels didn't matter. Pressure in his face, he knows where to go with the football. Bo kind of short circuits sometimes. Either he tries to get out of the pocket, make something happen, spins around into the back, he's going 10 yards back behind line of scrimmage, and that's where you get into trouble. And then you can throw picks, take sacks. So there's going to be some problems, which we're going to talk about a little bit here in a second. But overall, I was very impressed with what Bo Nix did as a rookie quarterback in the NFL.
Just completely agree with you. And just like I said, Bo Nix, and I remember just coming into that draft, I was like, I wasn't a big Bo Nix guy. I think I had a day 2 grade on Bo Nix. Yeah. His footwork was just very problematic at Oregon and everything like that. But I was like, man, if he falls with the right coach, and Sean Payton, he was a Sean Payton guy. Yeah. I always say this, and I said I believe this true and true, like through and through. Same thing this year with Jackson Dart. Brian Daboll, that was his guy. That's the guy, because there was a lot of reports that came out that said when they selected Jackson Dart, with Jackson Dart going to New York with the Giants, it was a Brian Daboll call. Joe Shane, for the most part, liked Shador over him game-wise, but Brian Daboll liked Jackson Dart. Well, typically, if a guy we saw this in San Fran. If you don't give the coach, the guy who's calling the plays, the guy he wants, like there's a phrase like if life gives you lemons, make lemonade. Some people just like to drain the lemon out and just say, I'm done with it. Right? That's what kind of what happened in San Fran in a sense. Yeah, it was some injuries, but it was a lot of stuff from people I talked to in San Fran. But, it's the same thing. Jackson Dart goes to a coach that believes in him, right? That's immediate confidence because I wanted you on this team. And it's the same thing for Bo Nix with Sean Payton. Sean Payton knew what he could do and what he did well and how he could fit him into the scheme, but also fit in the things that Bo Nix did well at Oregon, the quick game, the RPO, moving the launch point, really allowing him to be a full playmaker. Because you essentially, when you have mobile quarterbacks, Dan, and you have guys that can run, when you start doing that boot action off of the play action, the RPO game, now you get truly a natural RPO, a run pass option with your quarterback. As he's booting out, he can throw it, or if he sees that, hey, those zone defenders are back, I can get 5 to 6 yards, dip out of bounds. Now it's 2nd and 4, 2nd and 5, and we're ahead of the chains. And I think that's what you look for. But I have some numbers. You talked about pressure. We both have brought it up. When pressure got to him, he didn't get pressured a lot, but when pressure got to him, his numbers took a dip. So for again, looking at what he did this past season, he had 642 dropbacks. He threw the ball 567 times. Under pressure per pro in NFL Pro, like pro.nfl.com, like Dan said, go check it out. Under pressure through 17 games, he only attempted 122 passes. No pressure, he attempted 445 passes. So he was not accustomed to pressure. When he was pressured, he completed, again, his completion percentage was 66.3 for the season. His completion percentage dropped to 45% when he was pressured. His completion percentage over expectation dropped to 5.7%. His EPA was a negative Well, it was a negative 5.7 for completion percentage over expectation, negative 88.1 for EPA. His EPA per dropback was a negative 0.55. And then he starts throwing the ball further down the field when he gets pressured.
Yeah.
And so, like, his ability to handle pressure is a little bit of a problem. And they got to figure out how to, because that's the decision making. And I talked about his footwork, Dan. That's when you start seeing the clunky footwork. That Colts game was very rough to watch. He threw 3 interceptions in that game. And I remember one, I think it was Zaire Franklin, the linebacker for the Colts, dropped off in coverage. He read the in-breaking route, and Bo Nix climbed the pocket because he was pressured. He felt the outside closing in on him. So he climbed up in the pocket and didn't climb up with his feet planted, ready to throw a strike. He's climbing up on the move, throws the ball, and I'm like, why are you throwing it here? The guy's not open. The linebacker's underneath, and he picks the ball off. And it again, talk about it. When it rained, it poured. In that game, it snowballed, and they picked him off. I believe it might have been – it wasn't Kenny Moore. It was one of the safeties. He threw a pass on the right sideline. I think it might have been a 7 route, a corner route. And, yeah, the safety just came and undercut it. He was late. Anticipation is a little bit of a problem for him too. He doesn't anticipate throws extremely well. And, again, he was a rookie. But I want to ask you, Dan, even though he was a rookie, this is a guy that started – like pretty much his entire college career, 5 years he started. Is that an acceptable excuse that, okay, he's just a rookie in the NFL? If it's Anthony Richardson, you're like, well, you're a 1-year starter. I kind of understand that. Jalen Milroe, like, yeah, the reps weren't like, no, this dude set the record for starts in college football. I expect to see a little bit better anticipation from him.
Yeah, I think we can put it into 2 different buckets, right? In Auburn, it was a mess. Not just him in terms of learning on the go, because again, he was dropped into an offense where it wasn't very good. There aren't a lot of playmakers. The offensive line was bad. Yeah. He had to do a lot himself. It's hard to learn on the job when your environment around you sucks. And I think we could definitely say that it was not the best learning environment in Auburn. In Oregon, they take a lot of control out of the quarterback's hand as well. And if we look, kind of extrapolate what he did at Oregon and take it to the NFL, going back to what he did this past year, but since week 5, going into week 18, he completed 75.3% of his passing attempts against split safety coverages, which tells you he understands, all right, guys, if I got protection, I got time, and I can see two safeties, I know exactly where to go with the football. Yeah. We talked about the intermediate stuff where he's very good at identifying those spots in zone coverage. But when you mention when pressure starts to get to you, when you see man coverage, when you see blitzes coming off one way or the other, and you're trying to anticipate throws into open throwing lanes against man coverage, you have to make those split-second decisions. And that's where you do see the decision-making and hindrance really become a problem for Bo. And we want to say rookie quarterbacks can get better at some things. When you've been starting for 5 years now, basically 5 years, some of those things just don't get better. So for Sean Payton specifically, that's why this match was so good, because he's going to help him out a lot. And we talked about this before we got on. He threw the ball behind the line of scrimmage at a 26.1% of the time last season, which was the 3rd highest rate in the NFL. Yeah. Sean Payton baked a lot of easy options, a lot of easy, just like if I feel pressure, I'm going to dump it down here. We're going to do a screen here. We're going to get the ball to our receivers out on the perimeter and try and make things happen. I'm not trying to take away from what Bo Nix did, because there are some things that he did, again, outside the pocket, throwing down the field more aggressively in the second half of the season with more accuracy than I expected as well. But for me, the biggest hindrance on his game isn't necessarily the anticipation. It's ball placement. There are 2 different rules of thought. Accuracy, and people talk about this all the time, and ball placement. They are 2 different things. You can be an accurate quarterback based off the numbers because the receiver catches the football. But if you are throwing the football into disadvantageous situations for your receiver, which takes away yards after catch, which take away the ability to give your receivers time. Like, we see players throw away from defenders a lot. I see him throwing to defenders a lot. And that, whether it's away from their body or behind them, forcing receivers to make inaccurate, trying to come back to the football here, trying to lean out for the football here, go down to the ground here, and they're not away from defenders, trying to, keep them safe. So when you take the ball placement concerns and put it into, well, if we're going to speed this guy's process up, who already has concerns putting the football where it needs to be, we can create advantageous situations for us, turn those into sacks, turnovers. And then the second year, we know volatility is all over the place. If the Broncos offensive line takes a little bit of a step back, you might see a regression to the mean in terms of some of those turnover battles. So there's a lot that needs to work on, but overall, I don't think we're going to see a ton of all of a sudden just getting better at anticipation throws. You might just see him be more comfortable with this receiver versus that receiver in terms of putting those on them.
No, 100%. And to your point, before we close out the Bo Nix discussion, he attempted 300 again on the season. 642 dropbacks, 567 pass attempts. 394 of his 567 came on short throws under 10 air yards, right? So he threw 2,059 passing yards on throws under 10 air yards, 12 passing touchdowns, 1 interception, right? And it's like I said, a lot of built-in manufactured stuff that boosts up the statistics. Here's where he did get in trouble. The intermediate part of the field, the 10 to 19 air yards, 110 attempts, 52 completions, right, for a completion percentage of 47.3, 897 yards passing. That's fine. 9 passing touchdowns, 8 interceptions. So 8 of his interceptions came on when he had to throw the ball a little bit further down the field. He was a little bit better on the deep throws where he did complete more. He had more touchdowns. His the interception ratio was 8-3. So he threw 8 touchdowns, only 3 interceptions on the deep ball. But like you said, the ball placement has to improve. And I think for Sean Payton, it's just simple. Let's mitigate the mistakes, the risks. And I think when we were texting about it and working on the show notes, you call him a risk adverse quarterback, and I think that was the perfect way to put it. This is not a guy that wants to put the ball in harm's way. He doesn't want to make risky throws, because I feel like he's the type of guy, if he starts making risky throws and it doesn't work out, I think mentally it's going to be a snowball effect to where his confidence drops, and you want him to. I think Sean Payton's the right coach for him, but you want him to kind of be a little tougher mentally and say, you know what? That's one play. You come back on the field again. Now I'm going to make sure I get this down in the field goal range. We get points out of this drive. I'm not going to turn the ball over again. You look at some of those games, the Colts game, for one, where I think he threw 3 interceptions in that game by himself. In that game alone, the Browns game, he threw 2. But again, starting the season against Seattle, 2 games, 2 interceptions. Seattle, 2 interceptions as well. Like, it can snowball for him. And you just want him to kind of be able to bounce back after that first one and say, you know what, it's not going to happen again. But Dan, let's transition here to talk about a guy that was, I liked him. We both liked him coming out, and everything out of LSU. He was the second LSU receiver drafted in round 1, and that was Brian Thomas Jr. for the Jacksonville Jaguars, a guy that had himself a strong rookie campaign, came especially with a team that I think added Gabe Davis at the time, and had Christian Kirk, and they had some veterans. And you're like, oh, well, he's going to be just a take the top off guy, 6'4", 205 pounds. And on the season, Brian Thomas Jr. Targeted 133 times, 87 receptions, 1,282 yards receiving, 10 receiving touchdowns. He averaged nearly 15 yards per catch, 14.7. And just what he was able to do, take the top off the defense consistently and routinely for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And again, being 6'4", I've been on record, whether it was on Locked On NFL Draft podcast, when I used to work with the Draft Network, whatever it might have been. Then I always said, being a Carolina guy myself, I watch every single game live of Trevor Lawrence when he was at Clemson, and of course I studied him. Trevor Lawrence was his best when he had big body receivers that can go up and make plays at the catch point. That was when he was always at his best. Whether it was Justin Ross, T. Higgins, didn't matter. He loved the big body receivers. And now he has a guy that not only is a tall, good catch radius guy, but he also has elite speed with 4.33 that can take the top off the defense. And I think with Brian Thomas Jr., like this is a guy, again, the catch radius is there, the explosive speed vertically. I love how he tracks the ball too. Like he tracks the ball very well down the field, showcases late hands as well, and then he gives you that alignment versatility. He's not just a prototypical X that you just split out wide, you leave him there on the left side of your offense time and time again. No, Jacksonville, granted, new coaching staff this year with Liam Cohen coming in, but Doug Peterson last year and that coaching staff, they played him at the X, the Z, they played the F spot into the slot. They put them in bunch sets, stack sets. They did a lot of different things to really stress defenses. And I think especially once they saw, okay, we got cover one, single high safety, that's when they really dialed up that deep ball for Brian Thomas.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough talk in terms of what he did in year 1 to year 2. Mac Jones starting most of the end of the season for the Jaguars. So we have Trevor Lawrence taking back over. Stylistically, they're a bit different. Mac Jones is far more willing to just kind of let it fly in terms of anticipation, and I'm a backup. Like, I don't really care so much because he has to win.
I got nothing to lose, Dan. I don't have a thing to lose.
Exactly. He has to win off anticipation, and where Trevor has all the tools where he wants to make some of those tight window throws where maybe he waits a little bit longer than he should and then lets it go. But Brian Thomas specifically, I said it coming out, he's an elite vertical tree runner. He's going to come in and be that immediately. And you see it in terms of where he can catch the football away from his body. He's comfortable. You mentioned the ball tracking, not just waiting for it, but like over the shoulder, unfazed. He's comfortable in all of those situations. It doesn't matter where the DB is in his hip pocket. If the football is tracking, he's able to just kind of wait for it, track it over his shoulder, make plays away from his body, and be comfortable in doing all of those things, hauling it in whenever anybody's around too, through contact. You like to see that. And then you have, I think, one of the bigger developments for him this past season, where we were actually talking about the rocker step for him. At the top of his routes, I believe he's not very good when he has to sink his hips and then explode out of breaks. That's where you see him stumble over himself, allow DBs. So there was a play I showed you against the Bills where he has to sink inside and go back outside. He stumbles and he allows the cornerback to kind of come in and break the pass up. But when he's more upright, when he doesn't have to sink his hips as much, and he gives you a little bit of that hesitation, rocker inside or outside, he can continue his acceleration and his momentum and then create that separation. And I loved to see that part of his game, because I don't necessarily want him to have to accelerate, sink his hips, and break backward. That was never really a strong part of his game. But when you can keep that momentum going forward with double moves, or just kind of pressing inside to go to that corner route or go to the out, where you just keep him in more of a flow method, that's going to be a really big accessible part of him for this offense specifically. And you see that understanding leverage, where if I have an inside leverage DB, I can get an in route because I can speed to the outside, force him to move his hips back that way, open up to the inside or the outside, and then I can go back to the inside. So he showed a really good development understanding of, I think he was still learning how to see all of that at LSU. And then earlier in the season, you can see some of that all kind of start to mesh and bleed into him throughout the season, where he's developing, okay, I can see this coverage here. I understand where he's going to open his hips to the outside or the inside, and I don't have to just sink my hips and then explode out, because I'm not very good at that. But I can manipulate, I can attack the feet, I can move DBs with my intention, my shoulders, and all of that momentum, and then create separation for myself over the middle of the field.
And then not to cut you off, I want to bring up some numbers. You talk about the in-break and stuff. Like looking at the advanced metric again, guys. NFL Pro is just such a tool. His most the route he has the most targets on, and he was literally the in-breaking route. He had 41 targets off 166 routes ran, like literally 3.4, I think, yards per route run, and everything like that. When you look at what he does, and then I think the majority of his yards, 566 yards and 6 touchdowns on in-breaking routes. But to your point about changing directions, out-breaking routes, this is where it takes a little bit of a dip here. His out-breaking routes, he was targeted. Compared to his routes, he ran 101 routes. He was targeted 32 times for a target percentage of 31.7. 1.7 yards per route run. His catch percentage went from 73.2 on in-breaking routes to 56.3. And then also the fact that you look at his out-breaking routes in terms of the separation, that he created. It went from 3.2 on in breaking to 2.9, and his tight window percentage went down where it was like I think a 9.4% on outbreaking routes and everything. Like and I think from a yard standpoint was argued besides the wide receiver screens, that was his lowest productive route was the outbreaking route. 167 receiving yards on the outbreaking route. I would 100% agree with you. And I want to ask you this too. When I watch him, he's an upright route runner. I had to slow it down because I get tongue-tied saying that too fast. He's an upright route runner. And where his shoulders, he's very high when he's running his routes. And it's like almost, for all of our listeners, man, when I'm watching routes and I see guys that run with that forward lean, the lower shoulder trajectory, it allows them to sink and drive a whole lot more efficient and fluid. When you're high cut like that, now your shoulders are already at one level and you're trying to bring it down and not tip off the corner. But when you're trying to come down to a level that you're not already like close to, it strains the rotational fluidity of his hips where you're like, okay, I can see why you struggle on those comeback routes, those out routes, and different things like that. Because it's hard to be a great route salesman, especially like an outbreaking route, because you can you can stem the route inside, like take the inside release, try to stem them inside, sell a vertical, and then break back cross face. But if your break is too lumbering or labored, the DB can then put hands on you, slow it down even further. And instead of you just sinking and letting them keep driving by you because they're trying to stick with you because you're a 4-3 athlete, now they can slow it down. It's telltales to his route running in that regard. I think he needs to drop. I want to see him run with a more forward lean with his routes to where then you're not high cut. And I think that's one of his biggest issues as a route runner right now on those change of direction routes.
Yeah, I agree. And when you're also generating that forward momentum and you talk about being high cut, your shoulders also come forward, right? They have to come down, not just down specifically with your hips, but they come forward. So now we talk about adding a momentum change while you're leaning forward, and that's where you see the stumbles. He stumbles out of his route breaks because he has to stop, and that momentum, it's always still going forward, right? So you have to be able to find ways, and that's why you see guys who are high cut, but they have like these weirdly athletic hips. Justin Jefferson, for perfect example, he's got some of the longest legs I have ever seen. So he's got a small waist and like a long legs, but he's able to, the hip fluidity, you don't see hip tightness on his turns because he's always a little bit bent. He's always a little bit bent. He's not just fully running up this way. But at 6'3", it's hard, right? It's hard to run and be bent over like that because it's all that momentum change. So you see a lot of, like I said, on the outward breaking routes because he does struggle to turn outward. And that's all because of the momentum change. You can change momentum inside because you can carry it with yourself. It's a little bit easier to do that on that inside foot and then just kind of go into it. Going outside, you have to stop and then go completely different direction. You can't carry that momentum in the same way. So when you see him running some of those speed outs, obviously it's a little bit different. But if you have to go from a full, I'm trying to sell vertical because I'm a speed guy, and then break outward, it's so much more difficult. So I do think that what they did in terms of letting him run more of those inward breaking routes was by design to allow him to carry that momentum forward. And then you actually saw, I thought, a little bit better of yards after catch stuff for him, where you see some of that hip tightness when he's not at full speed. He's like, okay, I can kind of follow a block here. I can get in and out of breaks a little bit quicker. But once he gets up to speed or he's trying to accelerate, that's where you see the yards after catch start to fall off a little bit. He's not an explosive change of direction guy or the jump cuts and things like that. He's going to be more tough after the catch as well. So while the numbers for him are for yards after catch in the short were actually some of his best, I believe over 500 yards in short, 0 to 9 yards. But you see that with the receiver screens and getting him the ball quickly on drag routes. They also added a lot of those into his route tree as well, where he's a very good vertical route runner, but overall you get him the ball underneath, use that acceleration to get angles on linebackers and safeties so we can continue to accelerate up that arc there. So you do see a lot of different abilities that he has, but I want to see him consistently be in that role. And now you bring in Travis Hunter and you can allow him to do what he does well, and he doesn't have to do everything for the offense like he kind of had to do last year.
100%. I think that's going to be the big thing for me is like, okay, how much do they play Travis Hunter at wide receiver? I think in this situation, their cornerback room is solid. I think they got some solid guys in their cornerback room where you don't need the services of Travis Hunter to be your all-pro, Pro Bowl caliber corner that plays 90% of the snaps on defense. I think if you pair hit Travis Hunter and BTJ together, I think you have a dynamic athletic duo that, to me, that's where the stuff that we talk about with Brian Thomas Jr. struggling, those change of direction routes and things of that nature, you let Travis Hunter run that. Let Travis Hunter be the quick game guy, where it's the option routes, the quick hitches, the comeback routes, things of that nature. Some of those jerk routes, right? The shake route, things of that nature where he can stop, start, and break with meets quickness and explosiveness and suddenness. Let Travis Hunter do that, and then you'll still allow Brian Thomas to be the deep end, like 1st and 10, running that 15-yard dig route. That's money for them. Like he gets open on those type of routes.
Nico Collins. This needs to be the Nico Collins for the Jacksonville Jaguars, because you see Nico do a lot of those deep digs over the middle of the field, the vertical routes.
Yeah.
Brian Thomas Jr. can give you almost as much in that form as Nico Collins does for that offense. So you're talking about bringing in your Travis Hunter, if he's going to be far more of that type of, I'm not going to say Tank Dell, because Tank Dell is obviously a bit smaller.
Yeah.
But you can see the vision, right, with those two players. And this is how we're seeing, I think Liam Cohen's going to do a very fun job. He's gotten to work with, Mike Evans. You might see him run some of the Mike Evans tree too, because he's got that big physical body, which I still think he's developing in terms of getting guys off of him in press coverage. But you see some of the release package stuff start to work, where he will jab, step outside, or just give you a little bit of a hesitation and then go into his stem route, which is where you want to see him do that. So I do think that we can see some similarities between a guy like Nico Collins, not necessarily Mike Evans, because they play different styles. But I think that's what we're starting to kind of see maybe in year 2 for Brian Thomas.
100%, man. 100%. Going into year 2, as we get ready to close this thing out, man, Jared Verse, just speed, the power, just mastermind for the Los Angeles Rams. Rookie, last year was a rookie coming out of Florida State. And this young man had himself a strong season, Dan. 4.5 sacks on the season, but he had a quarterback pressure percentage of basically 16.8, almost 17% of his pass rush snaps. He was able to generate pressure on 76 pressures that he generated by himself. And this front four for the Rams, you want to run the ball at these guys. You don't want to let them pin their ears between Jared Verse and Braden Fisk and Kobe Turner and Byron Young. Like, you don't want these guys to get they don't have to blitz you. That's the funny part. They don't have to blitz you at all. Like, they can truly just literally just pin their ears back, get to you with 4. And that's what's so exciting about watching them. And one thing that he lives and dies on, his game is predicated off of power, speed to power, like violence. He's heavy-handed. As a guy that rushes the passer, Dan, he's a heavy-handed pass rusher. Love that about him. When I'm watching film on him, his hands are very active too. He's a puncher. He's a power puncher that has counters. He just keeps throwing his hands. So I'm not latching with any of these punches. I'm just driving you back. I'm keeping you on your heels. I'm not letting you anchor down and get your feet settled too many times or not. I'm gonna make sure that I keep putting pressure on you as an offensive tackle, and I do like him as a run defender. He's strong at the point of attack. He knows how to use his arm length and his power there. But then on the pin pull and the power concept, so you got 2 guys leading the way in his direction. Like it didn't work so well for teams trying to run directly at him, because either he's very quick-handed to like club and swim the first guy, and then uses power against the next guy, or he just powers through whoever's in front of him, clogs. And as a former running back myself, I can tell you that's the worst thing to see. You got a convoy, and that first car of the convoy gets blown up. You're like, well, this isn't going as planned. I don't have many ways out of this backfield if you guys don't seal this edge or get to create a daylight lane for me. So I think with him, this is a guy that, like, I don't know if he's going to ever be the 15 sack a season guy just yet. I do think that it's, for me, looking at some of the things, he's not the most overall bendy edge rusher, so you're not going to get the Von Miller 90-degree angle, like where you could pause it and just, count the blades of grass underneath his feet. You're not going to be able to do those things with Jared Verse, right? But like, it's going to be speed to power and strength, and just his power is overwhelming. Like, to see grown men with 3 kids and a mortgage and everything else just get walked back by this young man who's a rookie, and you're like, wow, like, just first year for him to be able to do those type of things is outstanding. But there are some things I do want to see him improve on, and that is kind of some more of the finesse counters, because the speed to, and you tell me how you feel about it. The speed to power stuff is great. The power rushes, the bull rushes are great. You got to be able to get back to the backfield, because the reason why, to me, he has 4.5 sacks, he didn't get back there quick enough to close the deal. He had all the pressures. He got back there. He pressured the quarterback. And a lot of times, not going to lie, he created sacks for the other guys, right? Because the quarterback feels that power surge, like, let me step away from my left tackle, and then they step into Byron Young. They step into Braden Fisk. They step into Kobe Turner, who are also collapsing the 4 walls and 4 quadrants of the pocket. But he needs to add a little bit more finesse to quickly win and really be able to close the deal, because then you go from 4.5 sacks to 12 sacks, 13 sacks in the season.
Yeah, this is a good place for me to have a conversation before I get to your question, because I think when we look at defensive ends coming out of college, there's a perception, and I fall victim to it as well. I did it with Donovan Ezeraku this past year, and I've done it from time to time. Guys that have a big bag, right? They have a lot of pass rush tools. They can be, the glamour, right? Everyone sees that. Oh, he's got the cross chop. He has a Euro step. He can bend here. He can go back inside. He can use speed to power at times. He can kind of club. You need something that you're an elite person at. And while Jared Verse last year was my defensive end one, like coming out, he was my edge one. I had him overlaid Tulatu. But overall, the reason that he's successful, and it's not just the sacks, only 4.5 sacks this past year, but the pressures. I think he had 76 pressures as a rookie. It's because he is an elite speed to power player. Immediately, as soon as you stepped on an NFL field, he was elite, and you saw it from day one. And against the Lions' offensive line, he was punishing fools, and it didn't matter. He's a chaos agent. Right now, he's an agent of chaos, where they were just like, you guys, I want you to just tee off on that guy. I don't care what you end up doing. Tee off on him and make it uncomfortable for the offense. That's how it felt. And when you see players that are really good with their hands, like Donovan Ezeraku coming out this year, you can sometimes get lost in the fact that what's he elite at? Yeah. What is he elite at? Nothing. Nothing. There is nothing. And again, I fell victim to it too. But I have to be able to look back at that analysis and say, well, I was kind of wrong in being as high on him as I was. Yeah. Because when you go back and watch, how is that going to translate to the NFL? If you're just sitting here, and actually I saw a tweet from Mitchell Schwartz the other day talking about Cameron Wake. Cameron Wake, and if you compare Cameron Wake with a guy like Danielle Hunter, they're unique pass rushers, okay? They don't win the same way as everybody else does. No. And what Mitchell Schwartz was saying was, I spent all offseason, because it was a week 1 game, if I'm not mistaken, where he got destroyed by Cameron Wake. He's like, I spent all offseason getting up there, like waiting and practicing against these specific things. That's not going to work for you. You need to find, like these defensive ends, what you are good at. And so practicing the technique that you are good at, right, is going to be able to give you better answers. So if you are good at absorbing power, look at Jordan Mailata, who I believe the Eagles in the first matchup, not the playoff, we kind of throw that out because of the snow. They gave up 1 pressure to Jared Verse. Yes. Absorbing power is something that entire offensive line's very, very, very good at. And to your point about speed rush and finesse rush and quick wins, Jared is still learning the finer aspects of that. But against 85% of the NFL, he has already got an ace in the back pocket, up the sleeve, whatever you want to call it, where he can bring that out. But developing the counters is a lot easier than giving a defensive end out of college an elite tool. that
Yeah.
it's so much easier to teach that stuff. So, and now we get to the conversation with Jared Verse. If he already has, there's the clip that I sent you that you guys are going to see, where he is against the Seattle Seahawks. Again, it's power first. He's rushing against Charles Cross. It's popping the hands first, and that creates that separation, right? So you see him extend and then bring around the same right hand, the outside hand where he slaps down. You guys ever played the game Slaps as a kid where you have two hands underneath, two hands on top? Boom. You see him take that right hand and kind of come around and slap. And then the running back is coming out and he understands the leverage that he has to the inside when the running back tries to work back to the outside. And then there's a swim. That is the kind of pass rush sequencing that he needs to work on consistently because the power to collapse is there. You see him just take tackles and just throw them into the pocket in the lap of the quarterback. But I want to see two-hand swipes. I want to see some quick swims where he does that against the run. He can knife in and out of gaps really, really quickly because he's, especially as a pursuit player, oh man, you run away from that guy, it is a mistake if you don't block him or if you give him a gap to run into. But this is the conversation with Jared Verse. You want quick wins or the ability to disengage quickly when you have put that tackle in the lap of the quarterback. But if he's still in front of you, you're not getting a sack. You'll get the pressure. You're not going to get the sack though. So there is a lot of upside here. I think the point I'm trying to make is if you have an elite trait right out the gate, you have a one-up on just about everybody else, and coaches can help you develop those counters. If you don't, you are SOL for the most part.
Yeah, I think I was like that last year. Like you said, Jared Verse was your top edge. If I remember correctly, I think I had him there like the whole entire. I think most of the draft season last year. And I think I eventually flipped to Latu because of what you talked about, right? We saw I think the Senior Bowl, Latu, the dip and bend, the hand usage, and it was like Jesus Christ, like this dude just knows how to get back there. But then taking into account the power at the next level when those guys can stay in front of you. Like, because I think it was, I can't remember who, like, because you brought up Mitchell Schwartz. There was another, it might have been him, I don't know. It was another pro tackle that talked about you got to be able to run through us at the next level.
Yeah.
The speed doesn't, the speed scares guys that can't move, but then what happens when you face a Lane Johnson, who's got one of the quickest, one of the quickest first steps in the game, and he can get out there in the vertical set and meet you at the top of your rush, right? Like, shout out to our boy Mason Johnstone. Like, talking with him, he played old offensive tackle, O-line at the University of Clemson, and you know what I mean. Shout out to the Tigers. He would talk about, like, man, when he's watching guys, like, can you meet the edge rusher early in the rep and take the air out of their rush? He's like, if you can take the wind out of the rush, you can kill the rush immediately. And Lane Johnson can do that, right? We've the Penei Sewells of the world, like these all-pro otherworldly tackles can meet you with speed and quickness and agility. But if you can run through them, you give them multiple things to think about. So I've learned, like, that was a learning thing for me. You know what I mean? Where, don't get me wrong, like, I still looked at, like, Abdul Carter. Like, people say, well, DP, did you have Michael Williams over Abdul? No, I didn't. Because I still look at Abdul like, like, Abdul can win with power. He's just still getting used to playing full-time edge. Where too many times I saw Michael I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing. You know what I mean? It's like high ceiling for him and a great run defender. But, I think he was in my top 10, probably top 5 to 6 or whatever. But, yeah, man, I'm with you. I think Jared Verse having that go-to move that a lot of pass protectors can't handle. And to the point where his power, you think about potentially, like, you know, flipping. Like, you can rush him and – if you wanted to get really creative, you could rush him and Byron Young on the same side and have Jared Verse rush over the guard because of his power. You know what I mean? And how quick his hands are. So, it's I think for him, the sky's the limit. Like, for what he's going to be able to do on this defense and everything. And the main thing for them now is just making sure they stop the run. If you can stop the run. Because I mean, when you talk about the as we get ready to close, you talk about the Lions game, that first game of the season, right? He had one sack, he had 6 pressures, a pressure percentage of 26% against the Cardinals, week 17, right? Like, the first game against the Cardinals, he had 0 sacks, but he only had 2 pressures, 14 QB pressure percentage, only 14. Go against the Cardinals, week 17, they end up beating the Cardinals 13-9. He had 7 pressures in that game alone. He didn't get a sack, but he had 7 pressures, and he consistently got to the quarterback, and to the point where one of his pressures caused a turnover. So he this is not a guy that when you look at the stat sheet, that's what we say, guys. I know Google is free, and I get it. But if you got the money, go get NFL Pro, man, because it does more for you than Google ever will. Because Google will tell you he had 4.5 sacks. You're like, oh, he didn't have that great of a rookie year. NFL Pro will tell you, let's look at the advanced metrics and let's see what he was able to do. He has multiple games where he caused turnovers because of his pressure alone. So, man, great fun show, great discussions all around. Bo Nix, we think that he can be good for the rest of his career, but he's got to clean some things up, and he's with the right coach to help him do that. Brian Thomas Jr., in breakers, vertical routes, he's got to work on the mechanics as a route runner with his leverage, with his shoulder pads or his shoulder, the height of his shoulders, different things like that, not be so upright. And then Jared Verse, speed to power, bull rush, you know it's elite, you know it's coming. If he adds any of the finesse and quick winning moves, it's over. It's a wrap for the quarterbacks in the NFC West. But guys, thank you so much for tapping in with the Scouting Room NFL podcast with Dame and Dan. I'm Dame. That's Dan. On the next episode, we're going to get into what happened to Marvin Harrison Jr. We're going to try to figure that out. We're going to watch the film, pull up the advanced metrics, tell you where he aligns, all that good stuff, and also get into Malik Neighbors. How good was he? Not just from the Google sheet, but honestly with the film and everything else. How good was Malik Neighbors? So, guys, come and join the conversation next week on the next episode of the Scouting Room NFL podcast with Dame and Dan.